Welcome to the BSR Magazine Show from BroadSpectrumRadio.com. Your host for today is James Branum. In this episode, in the second half of the program, you'll hear the most recent episode of Mennonite Radio, episode number 31. But first, we are going to be discussing the coming inauguration of Donald Trump. We'll be playing some commentary from Mumia Abu-Jamal. We'll be hearing about the protest coming up in Washington, D.C. and state capitals around the country for the Women's March on Washington. And then finally, we'll be talking a little bit and hearing a song about Chelsea Manning, who is being considered at this late hour for commutation by President Obama. So stay tuned.
What it all means. Let us consider some things that need to be said that have not yet been said. What we're about to see are the stirrings of a white counter-revolution. Let's not mince words. Make America great again? That meant white again. Trump's campaign began with a lie and ended with dozens of them. So desperate are white workers for relief from the rigors of today's neoliberal economy, think NAFTA, for example, that they fled to an alleged billionaire for succor and safety. When have billionaires ever really cared for the poor? Billionaires care about money. That's why they're billionaires. But Donald Trump's Trump card wasn't class, it was race. And he ran a campaign that the KKK would love. Prepare for a political roller coaster. The Trump show, full of glitz and hits, is about to raise the curtain. It won't be boring, that I can bet you. It won't be pretty. It can't be pretty. Because the election wasn't pretty. It's only going to get uglier. Get ready for one hell of a ride. Welcome to Trump land. From Imprisoned Nation, this is Mumia Abu-Jamal. These commentaries are recorded by Noel Hanrahan of Prison Radio. The politics of oppression. Most presidential elections concentrate on the candidates, their words, their positions, and perhaps more importantly, their persona. Of course, we don't really know these people, but thanks to modern communications, we think we do. They are, in reality, familiar strangers. We see them on commercials or on televised interviews. But the real object in the political democracy should be the people. For without voters, how could elections be held? Average people are often ignored, while the rich are courted like lovers. What few pay attention to, however, isn't just average people, but the nature of politics. For the rich and powerful, they perform transactional politics, or to simplify, they treat their votes as part of a transaction and demand, for my vote, I want X. For poor and seemingly powerless people, they demand nothing. They practice affective or emotional politics. That means they vote based on how a candidate makes them feel. Being poor and seemingly powerless, they demand nothing, for they feel that they're unworthy of taking such a position. They want help, not power. In this way, class consciousness informs our political systems, and the poor and dispossessed are repeatedly disappointed with the politicians they vote for. That's because they vote for who they like, not what that candidate has promised them. This politics of betrayal has left many voters feeling like they can't trust any politicians, for they'll only lie, get in, and do what they want to anyway, right? They wonder, why can't anything work out? Because most people demand nothing. How can we be surprised when we get nothing in return? Affective or emotional politics is the politics of children. Transactional politics looks at politics coldly and makes demands, and if those demands aren't met, they exact a political consequence. From Imprisoned Nation, this is Mumia Abu-Jamal. These commentaries are recorded by Noel Hanrahan of Prison Radio.
This next little snippet is from the YouTube channel for Pop Sugar website. Really gave a good summary of what the Women's March on Washington is all about, so we're replaying it here.
Meet the 3 women of color spearheading the Women's March on Washington: Linda Sarsour, Tamika Mallory, and Carmen Perez. On January 21st, men and women from across the country will gather in D.C. to remind the world women's rights are human rights. What began as a grassroots effort is poised to become the largest march at any U.S. presidential inauguration in history, thanks to the tireless efforts of activists Sarsour, Mallory, Perez, and more. Linda Sarsour is a Palestinian-American Muslim civil rights activist and the executive director of the Arab American Association of New York. The 36-year-old mother of 3 is shattering stereotypes about Muslim women, telling Pop Sugar, "I truly believe that justice will come to our communities at the hands of women." The Brooklyn native has fought against discriminatory police practices, such as unwarranted surveillance and stop and frisk, and is known for building bridges across issues, races, and faiths. Tamika D. Mallory is an experienced civil rights leader. After gun violence left her a single mother, the native New Yorker helped establish her state's Gun Violence Awareness Month. Mallory, a self-described freedom fighter, has worked closely with the Obama administration and was the youngest executive director of the National Action Network, a nonprofit founded by Reverend Al Sharpton that fights for equal justice. Sarsour describes her friend as a great leader. She has this confidence that is really contagious. Carmen Perez has dedicated her life to helping young people. The California native is the executive director of Gathering for Justice, which works to end racial inequality in the criminal justice system, particularly incarcerated youth. Carmen says her desire to give back was sparked by the death of her 19-year-old sister when she was just 17. Perez also co-founded Justice League NYC in 2013, an offshoot task force that tackles issues like police brutality. Carmen is one of the most thoughtful organizers I've ever worked with, said Sarsour. She's one of the moms of the movement. This January, these 3 women will lead so many others to prove we are stronger together. Share to show the world what women are made of.
As we go marching, marching, we bring the greater days. For the rising of the women means the rising of the race. No more the drudge and idler tend the toil where one reposes, but the sharing of life's glories, bread and roses, bread and roses.
The next song we're playing is from David Rovix, and it's a song entitled Song for Chelsea Manning. Playing it tonight in honor of Chelsea Manning, who, according to media accounts, is being considered on a short list for Barack Obama's final commutations while as president. In the midst of the protests, in the midst of everything else going on, we can't let up the pressure. Please call the White House, call the Department of Justice. Let's get out in front of this and speak up. A lot of people, and I think it's a very fair assumption, are assuming that the news of this is an intentional leak, a trial balloon to see what public support would be for a commutation. Ironic, given the fact that this is all about a leak, but nonetheless, I think it's time for us to speak up. Also, get out on social media. The reality of it is, I think at this moment, the administration is very focused on public support. They are not wanting to hurt the Democrats in the time to come. So we need to show that freeing Chelsea Manning is a politically smart thing to do. Also, it happens to be the right thing to do. So here's David Rovix with a song for Chelsea Manning.
Was an analyst, if what the say is true. She was paid to read reports, find the patterns sifting through. As she read the data, the patterns did emerge. Patterns that were clear both before and since the surge. Patterns of abuse of the most horrific kind. Gunning down civilians out of view and out of mind. Gunning down the opposition in the middle of the night. Sending off the scholars to be tortured out of sight. Sometimes you need desperate measures when you live in desperate times. Private man exhausted she was, looking at war crimes. She wondered what to do to allow the dead to speak. She finally decided to contact WikiLeaks. Now it's all out on the table and everybody knows. The emperor is naked, he's not wearing any clothes. Has to live within his skin. He stabbed Chelsea in the back, called the cops and turned her in. But not before the soldier took 500,000 files. If you printed all the pages, they'd stretch on for miles. Evidence against the state, right from the horse's mouth. Machinations in the west, bombings in the south. A treasure trove of details for all the globe to see. How much they need to lie and kill for democracy. How many drone strikes hit villages, leaving everyone to die. They blamed on someone else, the official line, not I. How many coups have been plotted by ambassadors who say that free and fair elections be the order of the day. Now it's all out on the table and everybody knows. The emperor is naked, he is not wearing any clothes. Of the bottle, and they're trying to stuff it back and stop it from illuminating everything we lack, such as the rule of law or playing by the book. Look, you can read it, it's right here. The ship of state is run by crooks, and they vilify the messengers, call them every name for daring to blow the whistle on the nature of their game, the game of taking lives and endangering the rest, in order for the wealthy few to do what they do best. Dominate the world for the corporate elite. But now their cover's blown from their head down to their feet. And now the stars and stripes is looking much more like a rag. The lid is off the box, the cat's out of the bag. Now it's all out on the table and everybody knows. The emperor is naked, he's not wearing any clothes. It's all out on the table and everybody knows. The emperor is naked, he's not wearing any clothes.
Well, before we go to the second half of our program, which is a program from Mennonite Radio, I just want to mention that we are currently fundraising to continue broadcast of Broad Spectrum Radio on shortwave. Without support, we may be forced to discontinue our regular broadcast. We do not want to do that. We want to continue to be a voice for peace and social justice on shortwave radio. So please consider giving. Visit our website, BroadSpectrumRadio.com. Another way you can help if you can't afford to donate is to download our app. Our app is on the Google Play Store for Android phones, tablets, other devices. Just search for Broad Spectrum Radio. When you use the app, the free version, it shows small ads, and those make us a little bit of money. If you buy an app, we get the money from that. So please consider supporting us every way possible. We want to stay on the air. We believe it's very critical at this time in history that there is an alternative voice for peace and social justice programming on shortwave, online, local radio, you name it, we need to be there. So please consider giving. Go to BroadSpectrumRadio.com. From your friends at Joy Mennonite Church of Oklahoma City and BroadSpectrumRadio.com, we bring you Mennonite Radio, episode number 31, recorded January 12th, 2017. Your host for today is James Branum. Just a reminder, you can find all of the episodes of Mennonite Radio on the website MennoniteRadio.org or through our broadcasting partner, BroadSpectrumRadio.com. In this episode, we'll be discussing the relaunch of Mennonite Radio for 2017 and our future programming plans. Secondly, we'll share a little bit about the history of Joy Mennonite Church and what we are about. And three, we're going to share some announcements of protest actions coming, both locally and nationally, over this coming month. So, stay tuned. So, as I mentioned earlier, we are relaunching Mennonite Radio for 2017. Now, we started Mennonite Radio in late 2015, airing on shortwave radio and online, later expanding into Oklahoma City with KTLR Community Talk Radio 890 AM, as well as online, of course. But about the fall of last year, I started to lose a lot of energy and momentum for the project. Partially it's the funding issues, trying to figure that out, but a lot of it was just the momentum of losing sight of the vision of why I began this in the first place. But recent events, particularly the election season and the ways churches have responded well and not responded well to what's going on in our country right now, has really sparked in me a desire to bring it back. To see Mennonite Radio really serve a valuable niche of presenting the nonviolent, inclusive teachings of Jesus in our present day and time, particularly as people in the United States. We are a part of the world's largest empire at the present, and we have a special role to play, I think, in what is to come. In large part, it may be resistance, nonviolent resistance, but it is an important role. We're at this place and time for a reason, I think. And I also just think listening to the radio dial, listening to programming all across AM radio, online, on shortwave, religious programming is often very dismal, without hope, often seems to focus more on what's wrong with you as a human being, rather than with the hope that we have of being something different. Often God is depicted in terrifying terms, and not as a deity one would want to love, but as someone to be fearful of. And so this program is about presenting a different view, a different understanding of faith, of ethics, a different way of connecting with the divine. So I think it's important for us to bring it back, and that's what we're going to be doing. Now, we're going to have two formats for this show. The first one is a locally oriented program towards Oklahoma City, and then an internationally oriented show. So let me talk about each of those in turn, just to give everyone an idea of what we'll be about. For our local program for Mennonite Radio, it will air on the first Friday of every month, starting in February, from 11 to 11:15 a.m. on KTLR 890 AM. Now, this block of time for the rest of the month will be other programming from BroadSpectrumRadio.com, focusing on peace and social justice issues, a whole wide range of stuff. But the first Friday of every month is booked for Mennonite Radio. And specifically, we are going to be doing something different we've done in the past. In the past, most of our programming focused on sermons, of longer presentations, either by myself, by other people. But instead of doing that, we are going to do something called, what I'm calling Voices from the Pews, or more accurately, you might say, folding chairs, because we meet in an old house, Joy Mennonite Church, at the corner of Northeast 16th and Lincoln. We don't have room for pews. So the idea being, though, is that there's a lot of people you can listen to in the media, preachers, educated people, and they have some more important messages, sometimes good, sometimes not so good. But what we don't often hear when it comes to faith is what ordinary people, what they think, what they feel, what they see. And so the focus of this program, particularly for 2017's monthly local show, will be Voices from the Pews. Now, some weeks, these will be short sermons or talks brought to you by members, ordinary people in our congregation. Others weeks, there'll be stories or even interviews where I may interview a member of our congregation and ask them questions as a spark for conversation. The idea being, though, is that we want to make this as comfortable as possible for as many people to participate as possible. We have about 30 or so folks, if everyone showed up at the same time at Joy. So I'm hoping over the course of the year to involve maybe at least half of our folks in this, and maybe the other half get involved in 2018. So I'm really excited to give everyone a voice who wants a voice. Now, I don't know yet what people are going to want to talk about, but some of the ideas I'm kind of throwing out there as ideas for exploration would include some of the following. 1. What does it mean to follow the nonviolent and inclusive teachings of Jesus in our present time and location? What does it mean January 2017 in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, USA? 2. How do we reconcile, how do we make sense of the often contradictory loyalties of conscience and the government? What do we do when our conscience tells us one thing and the government or our employer or whoever the other authorities in our life are, they sense something different? What do we do? 3. How do we make sense of the Bible and what should we do with it? Should we cherry pick and find the parts we like? Should we find some guiding principle to help us make sense of it? Should we just accept it all as literally true? Should we throw the whole thing out? I think those are all things people might consider. I would like to have some conversation, though, to find out what our folks in our congregation think about that question. 4, the issue of belief in God, of faith itself. In our congregation at Joy, we have a wide range of views, ranging from traditional Christian Trinitarian views to Unitarian views, to even agnostics who might see value in the ethical teachings of Jesus while not being sure about whether God exists or not. Is this a problem? A lot of Christians would say it would be. I'd like to hear from our members what they think. And then 5, I would say one of the biggies are the big ethical issues. Questions such as the morality of voting and participation in civic society, the question of public versus private schools, the question of what do we do about racism, sexism, and all the other forms of discrimination present in our society. Is it enough to simply try not to participate in those things? Should we actively work against those things? What do we do? And then finally, I'm hoping we'll hear lots of personal testimonies, stories from the members of our congregation about their lives and their experiences together, how they understand God, how they understand their journey of following Jesus. I'm expecting a whole wide range of thoughts, and from week to week you may hear very different viewpoints, and that's okay, because our church is a very complicated, messy group of people, but beautiful, wonderful people too. So anyway, that's the local show. It'll be airing the first Friday of every month starting in February. Now, for the international show, this program will be airing online via our podcast and possibly will also air on international shortwave radio, but only as funds permit, meaning that we will purchase airtime to the extent we have donations come in. If we don't have donations come in, this will likely only be a podcast. But if we have donations come in, we're going to be airing it in other venues, of course. And for the international broadcast, we may share some of the messages from Joy's local show, but mostly we'll be sharing sermons from some of the many Mennonite ministers, seminary students, and others out there who have powerful messages that need to be heard beyond a local church. We'll also be sharing interviews and discussion with Mennonite artists, writers, thinkers, activists, etc. In other words, we're wanting to show a broader picture of the Mennonite Anabaptist world. Now, I will say that this is going to be... Sorry, that was my dog. that this program will certainly be coming from what you might describe as the progressive Anabaptist Mennonite world, which focuses very much on peace and social justice issues. I'm not going to say that this is going to represent in any fair way the broad diversity of everyone that calls themselves Mennonite. But what I am looking for are folks who identify with the ideals of the historic Anabaptist movement and are seeking to live it out in the present day. So anyway, that's coming as well. If for those of you listening online, if you have a message you'd like to share, particularly for that international broadcast, get in touch with us, MennoniteRadio@gmail.com. I have several folks already lined up who have sent me some good stuff. We'll hopefully be airing over the coming months, but we'd like to air more. And the beauty of the internet is we can air as much as we want. So if you have messages you'd like to share, get in touch with us. Okay, so that's the relaunch. Let me now share a little bit about who we are at Joy Mennonite, a little bit about our history, since we're this local show is going to be unlearned, but also just telling about our congregation. So I want to share a little bit who we are. Well, we are a group of maybe 25, 30 or so people, a wide mix of ages, some families with young children, some single young adults, some middle-aged people, some elderly folks. We lean heavily on the young adult side of things, but it's a pretty broad range of ages. Most of our folks are white. Not all of them, but most of them are. Most of us come from, we'd probably describe ourselves as politically liberal or progressive, but not everyone. We also have people that might identify themselves as anarchists. We have people that might identify themselves as conservative or libertarian, a broad range of politics. What we do tend to have a lot of common ground is the issue of peace and nonviolence. I've seen that war is not the answer. We may differ, of course, on some of the particulars of individual situations, but a uniting force is our understanding of Jesus as a force of peace, but also our view of Jesus' egalitarian teachings, that we are all made to, that we are united, that we are connected to each other, all of humanity. We have more in common than we have apart. Our church, though, in its current form, began in 1965 when the Mennonite church, in the midst of the Vietnam War, established a Center for Conscience Objectors doing alternative service here in Oklahoma City. It was the property 504 Northeast 16th, where the property was located. It was designed intentionally beyond the margins of the segregated black and white communities of the 1960s and intended to be a force for solidarity and connecting. Over time, during the height of the Vietnam War, quite a few young men lived there at the house doing work in the community, working in schools, hospitals, etc., to do their alternative service. In time, though, others who weren't drafted, including women, also lived there at the house. In the late 80s, early 90s, when the alternative service house ended, what ended up happening, though, was a congregation sprung up from that, and that's what Joy Mennonite Church is today. There's a lot more of that story. It's been a hotbed of activism and radicalism for a long time. It's been a place of spiritual connection, of community. It's been a home of an intentional community, a community garden. There's so much happening there. I encourage you, if you're listening, if you're looking for a church home, to check it out. You can always visit us on Sunday mornings. We worship starting around 10:30 a.m. But you can also find out more about us on our website, joymennonite.org, or you can visit us on Facebook. Well, to close out today's program, I wanted to remind folks there is a lot of activity going on in the coming week with, of course, Martin Luther King Day coming up, as well as the Trump inauguration and the protest of that inauguration. In Washington, there will be the Women's March on Washington, which is happening January 21st. And there's more information about that at womensmarch.com. The last I've heard, there is also a protest planned in Oklahoma City in solidarity with this march, and I think there'll be some folks from Joy Mennonite will be there at this protest. I think, though, more than anything, in the midst of all this time, I think this is a time that is going to be hard. I think it's challenging for folks of conscience who want peace, who want goodwill in the world, to keep hopeful, to speak the truth to power, but also to not lose heart, and also to not become so angry and hateful that you drown in that. And I struggle with that a great deal. And so I wanted to close today's program with a bit of a prayer, and then we'll end with some music. But I think this is a time for some prayer. Dear Creator, dear Sustainer, the one who keeps us going and keeps us alive, we pray for your wisdom, for your guidance in the coming days. We're fearful, we're scared, but we want to have hope. We want to believe that peace can be possible, the world can be different. Inspire us with new dreams, with new ideas. Give us courage for the struggles to come. Give us love for our enemies. Help us to see the humanity in those we oppose. And help us to see that everyone is made by you and worthy of love and kindness, even when we profoundly disagree with them. Amen. Show notes for this episode, including full credits for sound, music, and audio used on this program, can be found on the episode page at BroadSpectrumRadio.com. Please send us your thoughts. All my contact information is on the website, BroadSpectrumRadio.com. And of course, would love QSL reports. If you're hearing us in your area, send us an email. Let us know you're picking us up. And of course, look for us on Facebook, Broad Spectrum Radio. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you for our next episode.